You then want to move into the asset register and actually start building this thing and constructing it to have a parent-child relationship. So you're grouping things into systems and then equipment, and equipment break down into which valves, for instance, are isolating or controlling certain types of equipment. One of the things you want to think about is the equipment's main function and sub-function. So here you can see a generalized layout where you've got the asset name, the system, the main function of it, the sub-function of the equipment that's there, and then it breaks down into the equipment itself. Also, I've included some criticalities we assign to here. So what that means is, before we get into showing how that relates within Effio, you want to think about your main function is actually what is the task that that piece of equipment and its auxiliary equipment is carrying out. So you can see here we've got liquid knockout for the ERU compression is this section here. And we also have after cooling happening here. The next part of it is really important because, again, we are big believers in touching data once. So if you're looking at your drawing, let's get the max amount of information out of it in one sitting. There are other ways of extracting data. We would advocate using that, touching that information once. Pull it out, get all the information you need, and that's about giving context to data, not just getting data out. So what we here is now the sub-function. So this sub-function, first of all, is control. So you've got these valves here which are actually controlling, and that's their task. We're looking at monitoring and then shutdown and indication, and pressure relief and manual shut-off. That way we know then what that piece of equipment is truly doing. We know it's a valve, but we need to know which context it's in, because if it's a shutdown valve, there may well be legislative testing requirements for it. And then your main task equipment as well, which is these vessels, which actually show you that it's the main thing it's doing. So, how that corresponds into Effio. Within the tool, we have a secure login, the first time you log in, you'll have two-factor authentication, which means you'll get an email with a code that you then have to put in. Over and above that, and then we move that, and then move on to this menu here where you start seeing all different views on the left-hand side. So we have the asset register, which allows us to identify equipment, the criticality, which allows us to understand importance, the bills and materials, which gives us the material aspects of all the required parts and spares that you can associate with your asset register, your maintenance, and then reporting as well. So what we have here is the main flat view. So again, it moves from left to right across here with different various bits of information. What I'll do is I'll switch to the tree view, which gives you then the parent-child relationship, and you can open this up and expand it out and see where we've got all the different systems and levels. That then breaks down into the individual parts and systems. There's also over here on this side is the basic data for this line as it's highlighted. You can now see that there's live tag number, tag identifier, all the information that's in the system here is all down on this side here. So you can see our main function that we talked about before, about what it is, and there's a drop down menu as well. So the main thing about having drop down menus is about making sure that we have consistent data. The main thing about being consistent is if there is something that needs to be changed later, and it's an error for instance, a consistent error is a very simple thing to fix. An inconsistent error is very, very difficult. You can see this by having some of the data standards in place before you start working this as well. Even the location description, we've got this. We can see here the uniformity we've got, where we've got the type of equipment, the pump, its recycle, its ethanol recovery unit. So it's a really obvious description over what this piece of equipment is and what it's doing. And that allows people to find the piece of equipment easily and simply as well. There's also sub-function as well, which again, that's a drop-down menu. You have a number of things that you can decide what to do for, and the attachment as well. So the attachment is actually the marked up P&ID that this has been extracted from. So you can actually see that that opens up with the full P&ID, and the red lines are the parent-child relationships as well. So as we start to build this, and you can see the things that everything's been marked up that needs to be extracted. We also got in here project control. So in here, these are where you can put comments in, and also you can see it's at the point of what we're trying to do is, as we step through these steps that we talked about before, those 6 steps, we want to make sure that we do it in the right order as well. We want to make sure that we have the equipment identification fully closed out before we start allocating the criticality to it. This will prevent any problems and rework later once you start assigning maintenance. This is one of the biggest lessons we've learned over the years is, you have to work methodically and accurately through in a certain order to allow you to produce this. Part of what Effio was about was to try and take the process and the steps and the order you have to go in and make sure the gap between each step is as short as possible. So as we start to use the tool, we start to be in a position where you can actually have sign-off in the tool. So as you work it, we can see here we've got the various different, where we've not started the work, we've got work in progress. We've now got it set up to do the quality assurance and quality checks that we would have in place before we pushed it to the client. So as a client, when you look in here, you can filter this purely for things that you need to look at and agree. And then once it's approved, we can then decide whether it's then loaded to the CMS. And then we move on to the next section, section 2, which is about criticality, and then on to strategy, onto task lists, and onto materials, and onto optimization. So all these things allow us to take not just the data build aspect, but the workshop requirements into an online forum. We can do this face-to-face as well. It just means you're not stepping out with the single tool with any data sheets or workbooks or anything like that. You're letting people access the data in one place, one source of truth, the same way the CMS needs to be controlled. We're doing this the same way. So when you come to load your CMS, you can see how it all interacts and you can understand the quality of what you've got. And any outstanding or questions that are outstanding, you can make sure you can highlight in the comments box. Within the hierarchy, if you wish to move some of these things about, if there's anything that you've highlighted as out of scope tags, and we want to move some of those back into scope, all you need to do is find the parent that you want to choose, which is this one. You just drag this over and it gives you a nice, this is again, shows the value of a good description, allows you to understand what it is. You can then take this and move it over here, pop it in there and say that's what I want to attach. They're the 2 new ones, and you move them. Very simple, very straightforward, and it allows you to move between large, if you were, say you were redefining the boundaries of pumping stations or sections of the plant for whatever reason you'd like to do that, this would make it simple to try and change some of the parent hierarchy if required.